What is life?
Is it a complex machine built from the ground up by some invisible creator?
Or did it originate from chaos?
Is everything simply random chance?
Is it possible that life has no purpose? For many people, their answers to these questions form the basis of their beliefs. For others, like myself, the most reasonable answer is I don't know. But for those who are so deeply woven into their faith, where every decision is based around their desire to get into an eternal realm of paradise, I don't know is a terrifying answer.
When you operate under the assumption that no one actually knows what happens after death, when you come to the realization that we don't have all the answers, life suddenly becomes more complex. Being in control of your own destiny can be incredibly terrifying, but also rewarding. When you can be whoever you want, when you can do whatever you want, when the chains of religion no longer bind your spiritual limbs, life becomes immensely more beautiful.
That is why, as an agnostic atheist, I no longer fear death or the unknown. Instead, I embrace it. Hi, my name is Ty.
And I'm Abby.
And welcome to the Not Gnostic Podcast.
Because
Right.
at first when I left, of course, I cared about the institution. A big reason why I left wasn't necessarily because I stopped believing in God. I just saw what was happening and I said, this isn't right. So I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want my name on this. But as time went on, I decided to take things into my own hand.
What you just heard is a clip of my friend Abby. On this episode, we discuss deconverting and some of the difficulties that come along with it. All music on this episode of Not Gnostic is from freepd.com by Frank Nora and in the public domain. How's everything going for you?
Oh, it's good. Just, enjoying the long weekend and
Yes.
taking some time to not do much. And
It is, yep, it is Golden Week, and you are in Niigata, correct?
yes, Niigata.
Okay.
You're in Osaka, which
Osaka, indeed I
is
am.
completely other sides of the country, but still.
It's nice. Blue day, blue sky day here.
It's nice here
so-
too, yeah.
Yeah,
Some of my friends, my friends' parents came up from Australia. We were spending time with them yesterday, taking them around places, and they were like, "Oh, I guess we brought the nice weather with us," because we were complaining about how it always rains in Niigata. But when the Australians show up, I guess things get a little better here.
Right. I mean, I guess. I don't know. I haven't had much experience with Australians, so aside from the ones I listen on podcasts.
Yeah.
I guess today we are doing our first episode here. So,
Yeah.
Should be fun. Should be interesting.
Yeah. Introducing, talking to each other.
Yeah. And so, are you going to change your name for this, or do you want to just stick with your name? Did you decide on an alias or anything like that?
So I do. I have an alias.
Mm-hmm.
My alias for this podcast will be something that sounds extremely biblical.
Right.
And it's because it's a character from the Bible. David's son, Absalom.
Absalom. Okay. Very good.
So I'll talk about that maybe later, why I picked that name. But yeah, I'm gonna go with the alias of Absalom for this podcast.
That's a very deep name, if I do
Yeah.
say so myself. But did you want me to have an alias on this one?
Oh, that's really up to you.
That's up to me. Okay.
Yeah.
You can just call me Ty, I guess.
Okay.
On this
Yeah.
one. So that'll be
All
fine.
right.
So
Sounds good.
all right. And I guess we should just sort of jump right in on to what we are discussing here. The reason actually we are having aliases is because we are both out of the Christian community now. So go ahead and I guess sort of what's your background on Christianity exactly? Things like that.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the church.
Mhm.
And by church I mean like the non-denominational church itself. And for those that aren't really familiar with that movement, it tends to be pretty evangelical, pretty spiritual. A lot of times, things like the Holy Spirit comes in. There can be some Pentecostal type ties with it. Sometimes, speaking in tongues, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
For some people, that can be a big turnoff, but I grew up with that, so it never seemed weird until I took some time to obviously have some critical distance. My parents were pastors in the church for a long time, elders, and they were, in charge of the governing board of the church. And when things kind of went south in the church and things weren't going well, and my life changed in different ways, I decided to bail out. But yeah, that's basically my background.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What about you, Ty?
My background is not that involved. I did often go to church when I was younger with my dad, but we moved around a lot. So I went to probably 3 or 4 different schools before I settled. At least 2 or 3. I can't exactly pull the number out right now, but we moved around a lot essentially, and we went to many different churches, I think. And I was always put in like Sunday school, and it was really awkward all the time just because I essentially like didn't know anyone there ever, or I would go to the same one like months later and still would know no one. So I never really like got into the whole thing until high school. So my parents weren't exactly, they were never like full on fundamentalists. They were never into the whole religion aspect of it. They kind of just went to go, essentially. They were like your Christmas Christians, I guess, if that's even a term, where you just sort of go to church on Christmas or when you feel like it.
No, I understand that. Like kind of.
Yeah. So my grandmother, on the other hand, she was very religious.
Okay.
So she often went to church, I think. But she lived in California, so we never really did that together too often, obviously. But yeah, I didn't get involved into the church until I was in high school, actually, and I believe that's when I first met you, actually.
Yes, that's actually when we met.
I remember...
What brought you exactly? I mean, because you didn't have any, strong connections to the church like I did at the time, so why?
Right.
What brought you to that?
My friend actually invited me to church when I was a sophomore in high school, so, and it ended up being the church that was back out in Eagle, so, and that was the first time I went. It was a long, long time before I had actually decided to become a Christian. In fact, at one point, I don't think I've ever told anyone this, to be honest, but I think during that time I played around with paganism a little bit, just because it seemed really interesting to me, and I was, going through those phases you go through in high school, I guess. But it was a very interesting time. I probably did not decide to become a full-on Christian until, I want to say halfway through my junior year, perhaps, of high school. And that's when I decided that I was kind of tired of everything else, and I wanted to just be a part of what was going on here. So my friend, my best friend at the time, invited me to the church. So, and that's when it all that's where it started, essentially, for me. And then I was a Christian all the way through college. So that's probably about 5 or 6 years, 5 to 7 years I was a Christian. And I moved to Japan, and about a year or so after I got here, I just started questioning a lot of things, and now I pretty much identify as atheist. So
yeah.
So do you identify as anything in particular, or like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's something that fluctuates, or has fluctuated for me. I left the church around the same time when you had moved to Japan. Of course, I knew you at the time, but when you had moved to Japan to do work, I, was leaving the church. Well, I guess I had left the church before that, but it was a recent thing, and so at the time I was still very much involved in some way. Actually, when I left that particular church, I actually did start going to a new church for about 6 months, and I liked it. It was nice. Partly because I didn't know all the secrets of what was happening behind the scenes, because I was involved with the ministry, and so I liked that. And then I I always knew that there's always secrets, and nothing ever is exactly what it seems, and I just lost sort of energy. I liked having my Sundays off, and I just was like, I don't
Yeah.
want to be involved. I didn't want to be involved with a youth group or anything like that. I felt it. I just didn't want that in my life anymore, and so I weaned myself off that, and as I started to do more with studying Japanese and things like that, I got far more removed from the Christian faith, and not because of Japanese itself, but because of just starting to do things that were not related to the church, because that was such a big part of my life.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it was important. So now, now that I've removed myself, it's been actually I have this. Funnily enough, I have this app on my phone that counts down from significant dates in my life, and I do it just to kind of keep track of stuff. So yeah, let's see here. So the event on my phone is called "Fuck You, Religion," and 1,621 days ago, I decided to fucking leave the church.
That is great.
Yeah, so 1,600 days ago, I'm celebrating that many days.
Do you
free
have
from that.
Do you have any like anniversary plans at all? Like,
do
you like
it's
drink
November
a bunch
25th.
of
November
alcohol at
25th
the
was the
time?
last day that I went to that church, and and that was in 2012. So I have no anniversary plans. But to get back to what you were asking, yeah, well, I might drink a lot of beer. Let's be honest, I might drink or something like that.
I mean,
But now I don't really identify as anything. I guess I mean I hate to come out and just be like I'm an atheist, but mostly because I have like I guess this negative connotation with some atheists that are just like so kind of just
I
really
can understand that.
jerks to people that are stuck in those religious roles, because they don't understand how hard it is to leave those communities, and they don't. Sometimes it seems like they have no empathy for those types of people. They just view
Right.
them as weak. So yeah, I'm an atheist. I don't believe
And
that
I mean,
there's God, but I don't know.
I guess at the
It's
end of the day,
complicated.
you don't. I personally don't think you need to identify as something if you don't want to. You could just call yourself agnostic, I guess,
Sure.
and that's totally fine. I know a lot of people will do that, especially when talking with like family members who are very, very religious. It seems like
Yeah.
people who are deeply into the faith, they don't have as much of a negative reaction when you say you're agnostic over atheist. So actually, when I was talking with my dad earlier, not maybe like a month or two ago, the topic of religion was brought up, and he was like, "Hey, so you haven't been, you haven't talked about religion in a long time," and this was obviously after I had already pretty much decided I was atheist, and it's not like I woke up the next day and was like, "I'm atheist now." It was more like it was a gradual process into becoming an atheist, but
Sure.
it does have that negative connotation. And so when my dad asked me, I just said, yeah, I was basically just like, I have a hard time believing everything in the Bible and everything like that it actually happened 2,000 years ago. And then he was like, or however long ago it was, and he was like, well, yeah, maybe, maybe it is possible that there is a God, and I don't exactly want to say what he said at the time, but screw it. He did say, he was like, maybe you should look down at that scar on your chest, essentially, because I did have heart surgery. And so he was like, you should look down at the scar on your chest and really question whether or not there is a God. And I wanted to get into it. Yeah, I wanted to get into it with him at that point. But
Sure.
I mean,
Naturally.
it's like, you need to pick and choose your battles. And I definitely don't want to like sour any relationships with my family or anything like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And they, at the end of the day, they let me choose what I want
Yeah,
to be.
which
they
is,
didn't-
some
yeah.
families would never allow that, so
Yeah.
that's something to be grateful for.
So they never forced it on me. I was never, I could always like think for myself and do what I wanted, and it was of my own volition to become a Christian, and maybe
Right.
that's why it was pretty, I guess, I don't want to say easy, but I mean certainly easier than other people to get out of the religion.
Right.
So, but yeah, when he said that, I was just like, I wanted to just because like I had like an arsenal of like responses to that, but it wasn't the time. And so, because I mean, it's like, well, okay, what about the people who don't make it through heart surgery or who don't do that? So what does that say about God and stuff like that?
No, absolutely.
I wasn't going to get into it, but I bit my tongue at that.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about that. I think, I know where I stand personally with the whole religion thing. I know where I stand in terms with my belief in God and all that stuff. But for some people, those things and those beliefs are really important. And, with your dad, obviously, that's a relationship with him. And maybe that could create some tension there. But, sometimes it's better just to leave things unsaid or not go. In fact, in some ways, I felt like I've had to kind of show a lie at times. Not to everyone. There's a lot of people I've been very, 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 very honest about my beliefs. But recently, my grandma, her longtime dog that she has had for years passed away, and that obviously is really, really hard on anyone. And I wrote her a letter, and I just said, and I just kind of put a prayer in there. And even though I don't really think that went to anybody, I don't think that the prayer itself went to any God up in heaven, but I just thought these are words that comfort my grandma. So, because she's a religious woman, and I just thought, these are words that are comforters. So I just, wrote, may God's peace be with you, may, those types of things. And I just thought, look, at this point, whatever I believe, this matters more.
Yeah, I mean, you can't pick a fight with everyone who disagrees with you, and even if at the end of the day you have different beliefs, there are still people you can get along with. There are people here in Japan who are Christian that I hang out with all the time. They're great people. Absolutely. They're fun to be around. And I have people back home who are fun to be around, and they're Christian, of course. So it's sometimes it's easy though to really just dial in on that hate for religion, especially because I still consider myself someone who has recently deconverted, even though by now it's been probably about a year or so. So I guess in a way I'm kind of like a new atheist, though I do not subscribe to the new atheist movement, even though I'm not really entirely sure what that's about. So, but I am a recently, I guess, deconstructed Christian. So I have a tendency to get really angry when religion sort of infects politics the way it does.
Yeah, I get you there.
And it's
I totally understand that.
It's really easy when I'm like in the heat of the anger to like start painting things in broad strokes, to start generalizing and things like that. But I think sometimes it's important to just, in fact, all the times really, it's important to really just dial back that anger, because not everyone who is a Christian is like that. Not everyone who is a Christian wants those things to happen. But it is a thing that I have to deal with sometimes. So just as someone who has recently deconverted.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I mean, I for a long time, I obviously held a lot of bitterness. I mean, we met in church, and you knew me, and at the time I was really involved. I mean, I was doing worship team stuff, and I was leading small groups, and I was working, to help, build the faith and teach all the young ones, and I was really, really involved with the ministry, and there was a lot of things to be bitter about.
Yes.
Especially being on the side that I was on, because I saw how the church was abusing, money and taking from the coffers, essentially, money that was supposed to go towards service and helping the public to just, fueling the pastor's lavish lifestyle and things like that.
Oh, man,
and that was the thing that turned me off. And of course, there was a lot of bitterness there. And of course, at the time too, when I decided to leave, a lot of the stuff that fueled the bitterness was the amount of friends that I lost in the process. And that's something that I think is just absolutely terrible. It's atrocious to think that if someone decides to leave the community, they're now ostracized, they become poisonous, they become these people that you're not allowed to talk to. And the reason I know that is because when other leaders had left prior to that, in the leaders meetings that we would have, the pastors would come out and say, no one is allowed to talk to this person anymore. I mean, they would say things like that.
Yeah.
You need to unfollow this person on Twitter. You need to not like, and it was stuff. It's just like, how petty is that?
That
And
is
it's like, does
ridiculous.
that even like remotely come close to demonstrating the love of that Christ? Okay, whether he was the Son of God or not, but the historical Christ talked about, no, not at all.
Right.
It was asinine to
No.
think that. So
Hmm.
yeah, I've definitely understand being angry. I understand resenting, especially when it does come to politics. And we look at the world today.
Oh
We look
man.
at where we are at.
And you know what? Church is more about politics than anything else.
Oh, it has. It's totally, and it's become so, damn political. They just stand there, with their Bible in one hand and a picket, sign in the other, just saying, we're not going to abort babies, or how
And their
dare
checks
those.
in their back pockets or something
Yeah,
like
and their
that.
checks in their back pocket, and they're just, taking it, and yeah, no dicks can touch other dicks. That's just not cool. Like, that
Oh
kind of
man.
stuff is just not,
No, yeah.
that's
It's
so
like,
dumb.
and it's so ridiculous too, because like, I mean, you were talking about the pastor's like lavish lifestyle and everything, and they always like constantly tout how money's not important or anything like that, and then or you should not be a Pharisee, and like, half the damn sermons in church seem to be about not being a Pharisee, and then it's like you look around, it's like all you freaking see are Pharisees, it seems like.
Oh, yeah.
By definition, right? Like that's the way it seems to me. And actually, like the other day, I looked up a statistic on how much mega church pastors make, and they make a shit ton of money. So like some mega church pastors will bring in yearly like $100,000 a year.
Oh,
Easy.
yeah, I believe it.
And I mean the one we went to, I don't know if we could classify it as a mega church. Probably not. I assume
You
mega.
couldn't classify it as a mega church, but they wanted to be a mega church.
Oh, dude, his dream was to fill up an entire, or dream, quotation marks, was to fill up an entire football stadium one
Yeah.
day, and of course that's why, football players were constantly put up on pedestals during services and things like that. But, so, I mean, like, I'm just trying to think, like, maybe what do you think our pastor's annual salary was? I'm thinking
well,
in
I
range
can
of,
I can
like-
tell you exactly
really?
what they were getting paid. Yeah,
That's
Um,
juicy.
they were getting paid a lot of money. The senior pastor of that church was making about just slightly at $100,000 a year.
Damn.
His wife, who did nothing for the church, did no hard work, did no administrative work, just his wife, just for being his wife, made, oh God, it was high up there. It was like 90,000, 80,000 a year. And of course, they hired all the kids as well. The whole family worked for in the senior pastor's family. It was all nepotism.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't hire outside of the family. They all made an extensive amount of money. They were raking in money. But the issue was, not only were they raking in money, but they were not paying the fucking bills for the church. The church actually went into foreclosure, the building itself. They were not paying their mortgage on the building.
Wow, that's ridiculous.
And they had to sell off a bunch of land. But that was not the first time. The church owned quite a bit of property out there.
Yeah.
But they had to sell off a bunch of land. But that was not the first time they had done that. They had done that many times. And not only that, but they owned a thing that they called the Prayer Center in Washington, D.C. But it was actually not that at all.
Right.
It was their, senior pastor's vacation home, essentially.
Oh my gosh.
They would go, and the church would pay the plane tickets and all that stuff. And the church also, what no one knew this. No one knew this. You had to be up in the ranks, and then you had to see the documents to know these things. But the church was actually still paying off the senior pastor's daughter's wedding, which cost an astronomical amount of money.
Wow.
The church was paying for that. The congregation of the church offering was still going towards that wedding, and that wedding was over a decade ago.
And I remember them all the time.
A decade ago. Okay.
They must really lie, like, about what they are asking for when they ask you to give, because I remember, like, they constantly asked, like, for money for a new sound system, and I'm sitting there thinking, what's wrong with the one you're using now? And I'm like, it's a pretty damn good sound system you've already got going. And like, it seemed like every single time, we need a new sound system. We need a new sound system. We need a new sound system. Or then it was like, we need a new building. Please pray for us and, donate 10% of your income to help paying for this building.
Well, the thing is, they would actually buy those things, but no one was managing the money well. Well, that is a lie. There were people working on staff at that church who were trying their damn hardest to actually manage the budget. But it was so astronomical that any money came in, they just couldn't do anything about it. It was to the point so bad, they cut benefits for the staff without telling them. One day, one of the staff members went to the hospital to get a checkup or something like that, and they said, your insurance you don't have insurance anymore.
Holy shit.
They cut their medical insurance to the staff, did not tell the staff. Okay?
Wow.
So you're talking about people, by the way, there was nothing to set up any retirement for there were some people on that staff for decades. They had been with the church since the 80s when it started. They were old. Okay? They have no money saved. What the hell are they going to do when they're dying? Those people need to go in retirement. They're going to live off Social Security checks. That's not even fucking fair. When the senior pastor is taking home the goddamn steak dinner every damn night, and they are working hard for the church to help people and help the community and do all those things that the church is supposed to do, and the senior pastor just continues to just take lavish trips to Hawaii, take lavish trips to this, buy a nice car. And look, I'm not against people owning nice stuff if they manage their money, but I don't think the pastors of that church even manage their own money, and it bled into the church itself, and that's why the church had so many problems without people knowing it. Yeah,
well, I mean, as someone who was not as involved in the church as you, I definitely think, excuse me there, I accidentally bumped the mic. I definitely think that they do a great job of, putting up a facade for everyone.
Oh, it's all a show, man. They do a great job of it.
They make it seem like they're struggling all the time, or that they don't have enough people for this or that. They don't have enough money for this or that, and it's all a sham. Like the church is nothing but a scam. But do you mind if I go ahead and ask you another question?
Yeah, no, you're fine.
What was there a point in time when you were way involved in the faith? I assume at one point you 100% believed in God, correct? No
yes.
doubt.
Absolutely. No questions asked. I was sold on the idea.
And the Christian God,
and
right?
I was really, yes. And I was very, 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 very sold on the idea. I mean, I was entrenched in the belief.
Okay. So my question is, at what point do you think, you don't have to give an accurate date. I don't think anyone generally has an accurate date of this, but at what point do you think you started to have doubts? What was or another question, perhaps, what was the main thing that made you start to question your faith or question the validity of these things people were telling you?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think that these are types of things that have to be asked to people that are dealing with leaving institutions like this.
Mm-hmm.
Because at first when I left, of course, I cared about the institution. A big reason why I left wasn't necessarily because I stopped believing in God. I just saw what was happening and I said, this isn't right. So I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want my name on this. But as time went on, I decided to take things into my own hand. And I began to do more things. I got really involved with the university. I became the leader of the Japan Club. I helped with that. I studied. I went and studied abroad. And at that point, when I studied abroad in Japan, I met all sorts of people from all over the world, from all walks of life, and different belief systems. And I was still coming off a very fresh thing because that was in 2014. That was 2 years after I'd left the church. And at the time, I had not gone to church for a long time. I was not involved at all with anything in the church. And I pretty much left, but those beliefs were still kind of lying there, but I didn't do anything with them. After I left the church, I really didn't. I stopped picking up the Bible. I stopped reading. I just didn't care
same
anymore.
Here.
But when I went to Japan, I met a very, 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 very kind elderly couple that I befriended, and down in Nagoya, and we did all sorts of stuff together. We would drive together. I did projects for them at their houses and stuff, and helped them with things. And we met by happenstance. It's a whole other story that I won't go into. But as I met these people that were not Christians, were not, did not have the beliefs that I had, the elderly man was a devout Buddhist, but they did so many kind things for me. They gave freely. They gave me money. They gave me food. I mean, they did stuff that made my study abroad experience so much more unique than it ever could have been. And they became basically like my grandparents, and they really watched out for me. And I came home,
great. Sounds awesome.
It was amazing. It really was. It was beyond anything, and no other student was getting it. It was just me. I randomly met them.
That's great.
And I came home back to the States to finish school, and I had the thought of how, if there is a God, how could God possibly send these two beautiful human beings to hell for not believing in Jesus? I thought, that is absolutely asinine. These people did more for me in the few months that I knew them than any of the pastors in that church ever did for me. And that was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. It was like, one day I was like, okay, yeah, God probably exists, but I don't give a shit about him. I'm done with being in the ministry, so I don't care. That whole idea is pretty fucked up and has not a lot of weight anymore because of those experiences, because I branched out and had international experience.
Right. And you know what?
And that was very important for me. That was very, very, very important for me, because doing those things was taking agency over my life, because it gave me agency. And the reason why I say that is because if I had come to the senior pastors, because you had to get permission for everything, if I had come to the senior pastors and said, I'm just passionate about going to Japan and studying abroad, they would have said, you are not allowed to. God doesn't want you to do this.
You need to pray more about it. It's
something. And so that became the first thing that I wanted to do. I got to decide. That was my choice. And that was the most powerful thing.
That's good, though.
Ever.
I mean, I think studying abroad is a very important thing, because it opens like your mind to like different views, different world views that other cultures throughout the world have. And actually, when I studied abroad, I somehow managed to hang on to my faith, and I would say I was really awkward because of it. Because we would go into bars, and like all I could think of, oh man, I'm sinning just by walking in here. And now I go to bars like every fucking Friday, but it's like I don't know. I mean, the faith is just, it makes you an awkward person, I feel like, in many ways.
It totally does.
And so when I studied abroad the first time, I managed to hang on to it, and I would read my Bible when I felt like things were wrong and shit like that. And like now I look back on it and I just cringe. I cringe because it's not at all that way. And so when I didn't, like I said, I didn't leave the faith completely until I left for Japan and didn't go back. Well, I mean, I will go back one day probably, but so I left. When, for me, the main turning point for me was when, I just left Japan, or left America to go to Japan, and I had a question.
This was the second time.
The second time.
The
second time. Yes. When I came to work in Japan, basically the second time. So I just started having more and more questions. Like questions that I guess just were not being answered. And back to your point about the whole, like, why are these two people destined for hell when they haven't done anything wrong, right? They're just a nice old couple doing their thing.
Yeah,
and it's
totally.
I thought about that a lot too. Like, why? Like, and our pastor constantly said, good people, even good people go to hell. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, I don't believe that shit. That's bullshit.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
It's fucking bullshit. No, good people don't go to hell. The only people who go to hell in the Bible are people who disagree with those in control, essentially. And so it's a tool to control people. It's a tool to control them with fear, essentially, about death or anything like that. You better do this or you will die or you will suffer in eternity, you know? And then you have like the argument where like Christians will say, but how can you be moral when you don't have God in your life? And
yeah, that is the worst shit.
I'm just like, are you serious right now? Like, and it's a legitimate question they have. They cannot fathom how someone is, can be good without God, because, they think God is like the objective morality of everything in the universe. And, people have even said like, oh yeah, because God did it, it was good. So God killed firstborns in Egypt. He sanctioned genocide, but it's good because he's God. God is good.
Yeah.
It's good because God does it. It's just because God does it. And it's like when you're that involved in it, it's like you're nothing but a sheep. You can't think for yourself. You don't have your own identity. You're just you just blindly follow leaders, and it's I don't know. In my opinion, it's a sad way to live. And when I went abroad, that's when I really started to change my worldview. I met people who were atheists, and they weren't assholes. I was like shocked. I was like, wow, these people are not like the people I thought they were going to be, because they always said, like, or it was always implied that atheism was a bad thing, that atheists were bad people or things like that.
Right,
and,
right.
And when I was in the process of deconverting, I really did not want to become an atheist. It was like the last thing on my mind to become. I'm like, dude, I don't want to become an atheist, but
right.
So for a long time there, I just tried to hang on to the title of agnostic. Just completely ignoring the belief part. But at some point, I just had to admit to myself that, yeah, I don't believe in God, because there are so many inconsistencies in the Bible.
Yes.
And then you look at the Bible and you see nothing but the Bible in the church and those around it. And they think it's love. They think it's humility, but it's not. It's the complete opposite of love and humility, is what the Bible teaches, essentially, in my opinion, after having read it myself. And then, of course, observing others who follow the faith as well. And so first, for me, I basically just tried to drop the religion like you did. I decided to like leave it, say fuck it, but I can still believe in God, right? You don't need religion to believe in God. And then eventually I just was like, well then what's the point of believing in God without the religion? And so, eventually it just fell away, and I became essentially agnostic atheist. So
yeah, no, that's cool. Actually, I remember, I actually, when I was studying abroad, I actually did try to go to church. I went to church 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, actually, I met a Japanese friend of mine who she was really involved with a church, and I went with her it was for Easter Sunday. So whatever, it was like, okay, everyone goes to church on Easter Sunday, but that was like the last time I went to church.
Wow.
Actually.
Nice.
Like just to go. It was in Japan of all places. But it's interesting how we both kind of had this falling out because of Japan, and I don't blame it on Japan.
Well, for one thing, I'm not going to blame anyone. If anything, I am thankful to Japan.
Yo, absolutely, point, absolutely. Thank you, God, for Japan.
Thank you, God, for Japan.
But no, honestly, it's up against Japan. It is because I think what people need are moments where they've left the faith and they find that next thing, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. A sport, a game, a new study, something that they've just become passionate about and immerse themselves in. And that really begins to change. And especially when you begin to interact with other people and you begin to interact with other cultures, something that you're not really given in a very whitewashed church culture that's just very, centered around the idea of God without really ever branching out to the thought of, aside from missionary work, but that could probably be a whole other discussion, and that itself
Well, yeah.
is very
Well, I mean,
problematic.
but even missionaries, they still have the communities, right?
Yes,
They often travel in packs, essentially,
absolutely,
and so
absolutely.
and they're like they go through intense like training before they. I assume, anyways. I don't actually, disclaimer here. I don't actually know the process of doing a missionary, but I assume there's some kind of training. You have to be involved in the church, for some part of time, I assume, and then you can go on a missionary trip or something. And at that point, you're so involved in the faith that it would take a lot. Even going abroad would take a lot to kind of, like, I guess, take you away from the faith or take you out of it at that point.
No.
It has happened.
Yeah.
It has happened, but...
Yeah.
So.
Well, so, because, I mean, we could talk about missionary work, and I actually do have a story about that, but I think that might be better for another episode.
That's fine. Yeah, we can...
Because I did go abroad for missionary work, and it's funny, when I look back on that, I think why that should have changed me way earlier from when I studied abroad, but...
Yeah.
But because of we're kind of talking about our journey here, and it's kind of an introduction episode, I guess my next question, and I realize it's kind of going on a tangent.
That's fine. No problem there. So.
But because we talked about where we came from, and we talked about our background, we talked about why we left. But I guess now we can talk about what does, like, what's the next step now? Like, what's the future? How does leaving open the door for the next thing? And what does that give us, and what perspective beyond just maybe bitterness or anger towards that? What's the next thing?
The next thing, that is a very excellent question, actually. For me, I guess the next thing, I'm just gonna continue, I guess, trying to improve myself as an individual. Try to continue to do, good things, be the best person I can be without, even without religion, because you can be those things without religion. I am going to pursue my studies, continue studying what I think is interesting spiritually. That's a good question. Even though I'm atheist, I do think there is a benefit to being spiritual. And it's not, because, we live in a very materialistic world at this point in time. And, it's not like science has all the answers. It doesn't. And even if it explains all these chemical reactions, like in the brain, consciousness, which we're going to have some very interesting episodes if we start talking about that. But it just seems to me like I guess I'm just going to continue studying and working on myself spiritually. I'm actually very interested in lucid dreaming because I feel like, that's kind of like the best way to interact with yourself. You're essentially interacting with your subconscious at that point when you are lucid dreaming. I had a very long lucid dream the other day, actually, and it made no sense whatsoever, but it was still really cool. So I'm just going to focus, I think, on myself spiritually. I'm pretty good as far as studies go. Like, I'm studying Japanese. I study other things. I'm actually reading, like I mentioned to you before, Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, and that's pretty good. In my opinion, I know you have your opinions about Richard Dawkins, and other people have many opinions about Richard Dawkins. But
he's definitely a polarizing man. But,
he is.
But a brilliant man nonetheless. I will not deny that. He is very intelligent.
The book is good, but I'm trying not to be so really attached to materialism. But
sure.
I find myself gravitating towards materialism like a lot lately.
Yeah, well, I think every human is.
Yeah,
though,
I've become more of the person who's like, if I can't see it, then it doesn't exist kind of thing. Even though I am agnostic, I do not claim to know what happens after death, because no one knows except those who have died before us. And whether or not they're still around is up for debate, I guess. So I just kind of, I'm just going to focus on, I think, broadening my worldview. Just keep working on, like, doing other perspectives, not just materialism, thinking about things from a spiritualistic perspective as well. I think that can bring in a lot of benefits as well. But how about you? What does the future hold for you, per se?
I think my next step really is allowing myself to continue to grow on what I have had. It's been, going on 5 years since I left the church. And even though that is a lot of time, compared to the amount of time I spent very involved, it's, it's not as much. It's only been 1,600 days of a new life, and I've been alive for almost 10,000 now.
That's a lot of days.
Yeah,
though.
it's a lot of days. Like 80% of my life was in one spot, in one type of worldview, and now it's like this new thing. This new 20% is the new thing. And I can't wait for the time when it beats out the amount of time I spent in church, and that just becomes a small percentage of my life.
Right.
But
I'm thinking about about high school still. So. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely though. Absolutely. High school is also a bubble, much like church. It has no bearing into the real world at all.
By the way, we're both just for those of you listening, we're both 26, so we're still we're youngins, I guess.
Still young, but feeling old.
Feeling old.
As time goes on.
Yeah.
But yeah, my next step.
We probably just lost a bunch of listeners there, but continue.
We did. Probably all of them.
Probably all zero of them, right?
And this is the first episode. We don't know anything.
We don't have any listeners.
Listen to our podcast. If you don't, we will find you and harm you.
No, we won't. God will. So.
Yeah, God will.
Yeah, that works. But yeah.
But okay, sorry for all these tangents.
No,
but my next step is really just to allow myself to grow and continue to explore things. I mean, Obviously, I'm in Japan right now for my career, and I'm teaching, and I'm loving that. And I'm working with youth and working with kids, and I'm loving that. And my partner, she's Japanese, and we've become really close. And so I just want to continue to grow my life and just do what I want to do. And do the things that I would have been told I was not allowed to do had I stayed.
Exactly.
And I'm not talking about stuff like, yeah, now I can fucking do drugs and shit. I don't want to do that. I have no desire to do that. I'm talking just about living my life. Right. I just want to live my life. I want to try things.
Exactly.
You know what? I guess if
you're free. You're free.
Yeah, I'm free. I am free. So
you don't.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think part of that, you touched on spirituality. I think for me, I'm not searching for any type of spiritual connection to stuff. I think trying to find the center of what I believe on those things, I still actually reference the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians. It talks about, the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I live by those things. I still quote that scripture. And the reason I do is I fundamentally believe in them. I think that is absolutely the just salt of the earth, the good stuff right there.
Yeah.
I want to love. And love means it's a whole bag of shit right there. It can mean a lot of different things, but I want to love. I want to have joy. I want to have peace. I want to be patient. And I think being patient is absolutely important. I want to be gentle and kind, and I want to have self-control. Self-control is absolutely one of the greatest things to master, and it can be hard, and some people might go, well, why the hell would you want to have self-control? Just let yourself ride with the wind. But, self-control is what gives you a brighter future.
It is.
It's what decides, maybe I'm not going to have 10 drinks tonight, and that's a crazy analogy there. But, I'm not going to have this, or I'm not going to spend this much, things like that. So I'm okay with those things. And so for me, it's that. And probably just listening to others and helping others, because like I said before, I don't want to be the type of atheist that just gets so bitter and angry they just look at people, oh, how can those people be so damn ignorant? They're weak-minded people. They're sheep. But just like everyone else, everyone needs a community. Everyone wants to belong. And I'm not going to go actively trying to mine them out of it. But for people that are struggling and coming out of it, I want to be there. I want to help those people. Right. And I want to just go, it's okay. It's okay to have questions. Because I think that faith is about not having answers. It's about asking questions.
Well,
that's super important.
It is. It is. And, at the end of the day, like, when you're no longer involved in Christianity or, like, it's funny how they constantly preach about, breaking people out of the bondage of the world, right? Well, you and we broke out of the bondage of religion, and I have never felt more free in my life to do what I want. I am free to finally discover who I am, essentially, as a person.
Sure.
So I think that is very valuable. I will never stop asking questions. That is definitely a fact. Even if science has an answer for something, I will question it until I can't question it further. So it's just, that's basically life. It's full of questions, it's full of discovery, and it's interesting, in my opinion. In fact, since deconverting, life in the internet, or life in the universe have become immensely just more complex and interesting. So, because before, we had the catch-all "God did it" phrase, or "God works in mysterious ways." It's like,
totally.
But now it's like we're free to speculate on everything. We can,
which is great. Like that gives you grounds for so much more discovery in life.
Yes, it does.
So,
and I think that's going to be the biggest thing for me next, is just self-discovery and basically just doing what I want. So
yeah, absolutely.
But I think we have pretty much run out of time for this episode.
Yeah,
so,
I think we have.
But I think we had a great one. And your name is, one more time.
My name is Absalom.
Absalom. Okay.
But you know what? I think you can call me Abby.
Abby.
Because that is a hard thing.
So it's Absalom with an M at the end there?
Absalom. Abaslom. Absalom.
Okay. Right.
The son of David.
Right.
And the reason why is because he rebelled against the kingdom of Israel, and he wanted to become king, and then he ended up dying. He got stabbed by his father's servants when his long hair got caught in some trees, which, I mean, talk about a bad way to go out. You're just riding along, your long hair gets caught in trees, and then, like, your dad's best friends come and fucking stab you to death.
Literally hanged by your hair.
But the reason why I chose that is because he wanted to change the status quo, and I'm all about changing that. And he's sort of seen as a villain in the Bible, but maybe he was smarter than his dad, and King David was actually like Trump and like just a fuck.
You know what? I'm starting to see the devil in another light in that regard. I'm starting to think maybe he was actually the guy we should have hung around. But
Damn it.
With that was so Abby, or Absalom, and my name is Ty. So thank you for listening in on the Not Gnostic Podcast. Be sure to check back later for any future episodes. Anyways, have a good one.